sort of polite small talk. This is where we need some elevator jazz to kind of tide us over. But yeah, we are now live, so people will be hopefully starting to watch, or we'll just have a nice quiet chat between the four of us.
Hey, that's fun.
Which will end up on YouTube for posterity.
No pressure.
Bring all our product anxieties and questions to you.
Yes, just becomes a group therapy session on the internet.
That's what pretty much every gathering of product managers turns into, in my experience. So
I mean, that is the origin story, right, of ProductTank. So we would be true to form on World Product Day. But no, we are not alone. There are people watching, which is great. So
have any of you been doing anything special for World Product Day apart from this?
Well, it's still morning for me, so I feel like I've got a whole day going here. But no, I need to catch up on a lot of things that are crossing my social media buzzword and keyword search. So it looks like there's been a lot going on.
I completely coincidentally had a call earlier today where we were planning the agenda for ProductTank London in June, where the topic is like career development, and so I've been asked to speak on that topic. So there was so I'm basically just plugging that talk in advance now.
All right.
Humble. Yeah. So humble.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, people are going to join. I think it's best to keep the time and just get started and maximize the amount of time we can pummel Ken with questions. So welcome to ProductTank Exeter on this auspicious day, World Product Day. We'll come on to what that means and doesn't mean later, but it's great to have you with us. And I was going to say more importantly, but that's a bit unfair, but it's great to have also Ken Norton with us, who by virtue of his newsletter and prestigious influence has brought a huge number of people to this stream this evening, more than we would normally have. So if you're joining from nowhere near Exeter, perhaps you don't even know where Exeter is, it's in the southwest corner of England, then welcome. It's lovely to have you with us. And if you don't know what ProductTank is, well, it's a global meetup of product people, whether or however you define yourself as a product person. It's a community for people to, as we were joking, kind of come together, commiserate, share war stories, share encouragement about all things to do with product. We didn't agree that I would do this, by the way. I've just launched into it, so sorry. But for your information, ProductTank sits as part of the wider Mind the Product organization, which is focused on kind of conferencey things. Hasn't been doing quite as much of that in-person activity in the last sort of 15 months, but has been doing lots of online things. They have a membership program, which you should definitely check out. And as they say, together, their mission is to make product people more successful by coming together to further our craft. So there's the mission. And tonight we're trying to play our small part of it. Does someone else want to take this so I stop talking?
I can take this bit. So there's plenty of ways that you can get involved in this community, which you'll find will probably help. In my case, it's really helped me level up both kind of my career and my own skills. It's been really fantastic for me. So I definitely think you should get involved as much as you can. You can speak at a ProductTank event if you've got something interesting to say. You can host or sponsor a ProductTank. We're hosting today, and we've got fantastic sponsors that Dave will tell you a little bit about in a minute. You can also write for mindtheproduct.com, or you can become a Mind the Product member, and then you get access to their newsletter, to more fantastic content, to events, to loads of really cool content. So I do suggest that you get involved and do that if you can. So, Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about our sponsors, Redcat Digital?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Chris messaged me earlier and said he was feeling really unwell and wouldn't be able to make tonight. But I am not going to try and do an impression of him, but I will point you in the direction of Redcat, who are very kindly sponsoring this evening. So we're really grateful to them for their support. Redcat is a recruitment agency based in the UK. So for those people who are joining us from the UK, have a look at their website, redcat-digital.com. And Chris is your man in terms of product roles. He said to say to just give him a Google. If you search Chris Gavin in LinkedIn, he's the top result. So if you are looking for product opportunities, interested in what's out there, obviously because of COVID, one of the opportunities that's emerged is being able to work from anywhere. So I know he's got a number of roles for remote product managers. So that's really exciting. But if you're thinking about moving, they are a great place to check out what is available in the market. So thanks to Redcat this evening. Cool. So now we get to welcome Ken officially. Tor, do you want to do this?
Sure, yeah. So it's our pleasure to welcome Ken Norton, who I'm sure many of you know from his newsletter. If you're part of our local community and you're not familiar with Ken, I am not going to attempt to do his career justice by speaking for him, so I will let him introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. I am joining from San Francisco. So everybody keeps saying tonight, still this morning for me. So I get a lot more of World Product Day left in my day. But I'm super excited to be here. Love connecting with the product management community. And this is an awesome opportunity to kind of get to know everybody and unfortunately not get to travel to Exeter, which would have been a really awesome opportunity, but maybe I'll get to do that in the future. But yeah, just a little bit about myself. I started as a software engineer, spent the first part of my career out here in the Bay Area working for .com companies and startups in the first bubble and during the original kind of .com days, and then moved into product management. I would say, boy, it's almost 20 years, probably 20 plus years ago now. I think like a lot of people, I probably had the job title before I realized what product management was, and in many ways was doing the job before I had the job title. And so in, early days, about 15 plus years ago, started writing a little bit about what product management meant, because of what I found is there's a lot of inconsistencies and even just, how the title was used and what the role defined is. And so wrote a bunch of things and then, that kind of continued over the years and allowed me to connect with a lot of folks who, were able to kind of point to some of my pieces and say, oh yeah, that's the job I think I want to do, or that's the job I'm doing and I didn't realize it. And so that's kind of led to what I think is a really fulfilling career, being able to connect and work with product managers and product leaders and help watch people's careers develop. I ended up spending about 14 years at Google. I led a bunch of product teams there, and then also worked in Google Ventures, which is now called GV, where I had the opportunity to work with a lot of the portfolio companies that GV invests in. And that gave me a lot more exposure to even more companies, more product leaders. And that helped me realize that really my true passion is working with and coaching product leaders and product managers. And so as the pandemic roared, I sort of confronted a career choice, which was, am I ready to do this full time? And so last October, left Google. I am now a full-time coach to product managers, product leaders. I work with some companies where I do group coaching of entire teams. Also work with a lot of individual folks, mostly product managers, product leaders, mid-career folks, and then executives at tech companies. So what I do now is a lot of what I've decided over the last 20 so years is my passion.
Great. So one thing, just to dig a little deeper on that, one thing I see is that sometimes people think that coaching is something that only executives have, or that is sort of somehow limited to executives. So, often I encourage more senior product managers to consider being a coach to more junior product managers. So can you talk a little bit about sort of the value of coaching across the career sort of arc, but also the value of being a coach for people who have that opportunity?
Yeah. And I think it's probably important to define what I mean by coaching, because I think a lot of times people will call themselves coaches, but maybe they're doing more training or advising or consulting, and sort of coaching plays a role in all of those, but it is distinct in a lot of ways. To me, coaching, is very different from being an advisor or a consultant, in that, most of those sort of mentorship, advice, consulting relationships are pretty unbalanced, right? You hire an advisor or a consultant because you want them to tell you what to do, right? They have a set of experience, they have expertise, and you want them to tell you what you should do. And what I've learned in my career is that there's two problems with giving advice, right? The first one is that it might be ignored, and the second is that it might be followed. And advice is really prone to survivorship bias, right? I don't know that what worked for me had anything to do with success, right? I don't know if it was unique to my situation, or maybe I did that, but it was actually not in any way correlated with success. I think back, I worked for a bunch of really high growth companies. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, maybe we could have done anything and we still would have grown. Maybe we shouldn't have showed up to work and we would have grown even faster. So if I give you advice on what I did, I don't know if that's going to help you. It may not have anything to do with your environment. But I think more importantly, it may not actually be addressing the real need. And this is where I think coaching comes into play. Is sometimes we ask for advice because we think we want to solve a particular problem that we have. But the underlying problem might be very different. And so if you come to me and you say, I'm not very effective at running one-on-ones with my team, I can give you a whole bunch of advice on how to run a one-on-one, right? I can tell you all about like the best agenda, how to run it, how to structure it. But through coaching, which is much more of a partnership and much more of sort of asking questions and getting to the depth of the problem, we might discover that the reason you're having a hard time with one-on-ones is because you don't have confidence in your leadership abilities. So me giving you an agenda on how to run your one-on-ones and giving you a bunch of advice isn't going to solve that underlying problem. And so to me, that's really the fundamental difference. And coaches, are more about sort of being in your corner with you, teaming up with you, helping you unlock your potential. And our experience comes into play as coaches. Like my vast experience and years of being a product developer and a product manager comes to play with coaching, but not through the answers I give. It comes in helping me understand what questions to ask. And so I think to me, coaching is more about sort of challenging someone, helping to understand where they're struggling, what might be the underlying challenge, helping them get through that, helping them connect more with their values, helping them connect more with what their unique skills are. And so to me, that's the difference. And, coaching is really powerful in the workplace as well. And so as a manager, I think the more you can develop your coaching skills, the more you'll discover that you'll actually help people develop and help people connect with whatever it is their potential is, whatever their kind of unique skill set is. So, coaching, I think to get back to Tor's original question, coaching is valuable at any step, any point in your journey, right? I think whether you're just starting out or whether you're a super experienced CEO, coaching is valuable. But I think you need to understand what it is you're asking for and what you're getting. And if you're looking for training, or if you're looking for advice, or if you're looking for a consultant to just tell you what to do, there are other places to get that might be useful. But coaching is much more about this sense of sort of helping people recognize their full potential by partnering with them in a way that helps them tap into that.
So before we just ask any more questions, what I'd like to do is just remind people that you can submit your own questions for us. So we put a form out on our meetup event, and we've had some fantastic questions that you guys have sent us through, and we'll be asking some of those over the course of this evening. But you can also go to Slido, which is sli.do, and enter the code PTX, PTEXE, into that, and you'll be able to submit some more questions, and people can vote on those, and we can go forward and ask some of those questions at the end as well. So yeah, please do get on there and ask any questions that you've got. It's better to pop them in there than in the YouTube comments, just because that way we can see which are the most popular questions. So please go ahead and do that. Have we got another question? Oh, let's see what we've got on the document.
I'm probably dating myself, but I see PTEXE and I'm afraid to click on it because I'm afraid it's going to be a virus that's going to ruin my Windows machine. Maybe that just dates me.
Might ruin one of the machines that Tor's got. Or Tor, you're on mute.
I was going to say it's okay. There's no dot. There's no dot.
There's no dot. Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so another thing I know might be interesting to touch on is, given your experience with product management, how have you seen the role change and evolve over that period of time?
Yeah, a lot. And I think in a lot of positive ways, I think for the most part, I think when I started in product management, in Silicon Valley and, say the late 90s, early 2000s, I think there was a sense that it meant very different things at different companies. Like you'd have some companies like Intel where it was a more technical role. You might have other companies where it was seen as much more of a sort of a marketing role. You had, the CPG world and the consumer package role where it was more about brand marketing. And so a lot of what sort of inspired me to write down some of the early things I did was just this sense of like, can we just talk about what we mean when we talk about this job? And for me at that point, I think there was really, being in engineering, there was this sense that there's like engineering and then there's business, right? And it's like a business, and everything that's not engineering is business. And so I think there was still this sort of evolutionary process, particularly with internet companies and web companies, where we're still really defining the technical problem in the stack, that we needed some sort of maturation. And I think the key characteristics in the beginning still hold true, which is the product manager is the center of this hub between a bunch of different important roles that help teams and companies build great products. You have engineering, you have design, you have marketing, you have sales, you have the customer. And the PM is really this sort of centerpiece that allows all these groups to connect in a way where information is flowing effectively and teams are working together well. And so I don't think that has changed, and that, and even more so has kind of come to light. I think some sense of who's responsible for outcomes and who's responsible for, sort of operating, a group of people that are building something versus who's accountable for what the outcomes are, I think has changed and evolved a lot in a lot of positive ways, where, I now think that PMs are establishing themselves more as, really being the tip of the spear for helping their teams be responsible for outcomes. Like, what are we going to ultimately do that matters? What problem are we solving? What opportunity we're creating, and less of being responsible for output, right? It's just like, how much are we shipping? How much code do we write? When I started my career, there was a lot of output was measured even in lines of code, right? It's like, how many lines of code are we shipping? And so I think this shift toward, we should get as close as possible to understanding what's the impact we're having here and what are we building and why does it matter? And then how are we going to measure that real output? And so I think a lot of the shift over the last 20 years has been trying to center product management much more in that sort of accountability for what it is we're doing and why it matters and who it matters to, and less of the actual work product itself.
And do you feel like the perception or understanding of product managers by people who are not product managers has changed as well? This sort of touches on something that, I think we're starting to get, at least, I'm starting to get a better understanding of is just, the different worlds that there are when you talk about product management. And I think this really touches on a lot of the work that Marty Kagan has done. And I think has really kind of paved the way on and sort of thinking about empowered product management versus, sort of feature teams. And I think this touches on something that, it took me a long time to recognize, being here in Silicon Valley and having the good fortune of only working for companies that, I think you'd categorize as empowered teams. That there are sometimes two different worlds, both in terms of how people think about product management and what the role is. And it's like, if you've ever read the Philip Pullman books, like, his Dark Materials or, the Golden Compass, where there's like these parallel universes, and nobody in either universe can even imagine what the other universe is like until someone's able to travel between them. And so in some ways, like, Marty Kagan is like the person who's traveled between these universes. And what I find is, here in Silicon Valley, for most of these, really empowered product teams, it's very hard to imagine that there are teams where they're not given control over outcomes, right? They're not given definition of the roadmap. They're not allowed to connect to customers. Like, that sort of seems very alien to people who've built products this way. And then on the other side, I talk to people who are like, how do I convince my CEO to care about products and care about product management and let me talk to the customers? And to them, it sometimes seems very alien that there's this other world where empowered teams are building product and, are accountable for outcomes. And so to me, that seems to be the schism that is framing much of these discussions. And so, if you're in a product powered organization, talking about what product management means, it is very much the centerpiece of the entire business strategy of the company, right? I mean, when you're in a place like Google,
or Apple, are companies that are very empowered. Like, what do people think about product management? Well, it's the facilitator for helping us accomplish all of our goals and outcomes, and in many ways driving the bus. But you might go talk to somebody in a more an older industry, or an industry that just doesn't have this point of view, and to them it's the person who's kind of keeping engineers in line, or is managing the IT bus, or is just too slow in shipping the features I'm asking them to build. And so I think any conversation around what is product management has to start from this sense of like, what is the product culture? How does the company think about technology, what we're building, how we're accountable, what problems we're trying to solve? Because otherwise it seems like you're oftentimes speaking very, very different languages.
We had quite a few questions actually about empowered teams, and like you said, advice on how can I become more empowered, etc. And obviously that's going to be completely different on every different for every different use case. But do you have any tips on how to spot an empowered product team before you join somewhere when you're looking for an opportunity?
Yeah, I do. And this has been sort of the theme of some of my more recent newsletters. So, you can go check out some of the things I've written about product cultures, and newsletter.bringthedonuts.com. And, there are definitely a bunch of things you can look into, and I'll also throw in a pitch for Empowered, Marty Kagan's new book, where he, literally has a whole section on just like, what questions should you ask? I think it stems from, you want to see that product leaders are in a role where they have influence in the organization. So you want to look and see, who's running product, where do they sit in the organization? Are they reporting to the CEO, or are they like stuffed in a corner under, a CFO or something? Do people who have come from winning product environments, are they running the show, or are they somehow, kind of subservient? A big one is just, how do people think about technology in this company, right? Do they think of technology as the driver, the fuel for the business? Or do they think of it like IT, it's a cost center, right? Is the biggest stress of the executives that engineers cost too much, or is the biggest stress of the executives that we can't hire enough of them because there's so much we want to build? And so you'll pick up on some of those themes, certainly, and there's a lot you can learn. A great question through the interview process is just, talk me through something that got shipped recently. Like, where did it come from, right? Do you hear a lot of conversations around discovery and empowered teams sitting down with customers and users and translating problems into products and testing them and shipping them? Or do you hear a lot about, sales dumping a bunch of features into someone's lap and somebody trying to do as good a job as any of shipping them within time and within budget? Like, there's even just sort of the language and just the terminology that you use will touch on this. But yeah, I think this is the sort of formative question for us right now is, we have, I think, tremendous evidence that empowered product teams build winning products. We've got trillion-dollar companies, the biggest businesses, companies, the biggest unicorns, the biggest growth, some of the best winning products that we have all loved and grown and used, built this way. And then for whatever reason, we have this pool of other organizations and executives that seem to resist this, or on the surface say, I agree with it, but then don't live it.
We have had a lot of questions on Slido already, which is great to see. So I feel like we should dip into those. Also, for everybody watching, even if you don't have a question of your own, do take a look on Slido and upvote the questions you think are most interesting. We have something like 19 questions already, so we better get stuck in.
All right.
The top rated question at the moment comes from Philippe. That's, what do you think is one underrated PM skill?
Oh, that's a juicy one. I don't know. I'm coming up with a whole bunch of answers in my head, which I think probably just speaks to how complicated the job is and how it is just such a constellation of all these different skill sets. I would say, the hardest skill and probably the most underrated is just how you work with people, right? And I think we used to even call it soft skills, right? Which I think is idiotic because it implies that it's somehow easy and unimportant. But this is really the juice of it is, how are you effective at just communicating with people that have different backgrounds, different mindsets, different perspectives, different skills, and, persuading them, convincing them, interacting with them, synthesizing ideas, just all of the sort of human connection part of the job, I think tends to be tremendously underrated. And I think a lot of people that find themselves in PM sometimes realize that they wandered into the job because they had this skill about connecting with other people that wasn't necessarily intuitive to them, or even aware to them. And this is a little bit of my journey. Like I ended up being the one engineer that everybody wouldn't mind inviting to the customer meeting or bringing into an executive, offsite. And the engineers were totally happy with me going because they didn't want to go. And I was totally happy with going because I wanted more of that. But I don't think I would have ever been in tune with, hey, I'm actually pretty good at connecting with people and communicating with people and sort of empathizing and understanding different points of views and trying to synthesize and translate. And I think the more explicit you can be about that as a skill that you want to work on and improve and develop and emphasize and put forward, I think the more successful you'll be as a PM. But it's often, in many ways sort of buried or seen as secondary to, execution and strategy and vision and technical skills. But it really is the way that all this stuff gets done is through people.
If I could possibly follow up on that, because in your writing, you've sort of drawn the link back to kind of your origins of product management and kind of where that comes from in terms of brand managers, and sort of highlighted the consistency of kind of the product skill set. Do you think that, given 90 odd years of history, that is some kind of an eternal rule of product management? Is that, it's all about talking to customers and understanding and framing problems, building the right solution, working with people to sell it, and making sure you're measuring the right things? Or, the kind of underrated skills, are there new skills that people should be thinking about? Things are always changing, or are there new skills that you think that product managers should be thinking about and developing?
Yeah, I mean, the new skills are largely, details and technical. I mean, it's, you're building, websites. You're not building consumer packaged goods, or you're now building, mobile apps. But it's like that's a skill set that's really around the application of it. But I think the fundamental skill that you described of talking to customers, understanding their problems, translating that into something innovative you can build that will solve that problem or capture that opportunity, working with a team to get it done in a way that actually solves that problem, and then scaling that. I mean, that's fundamentally what this is all about, has been from the beginning. So you even think back of, what's the best book on learning to communicate? And it's like How to Win Friends and Influence Other People. It was written in like 1935 or something, right? It's just like, that's, like there's a lot of new stuff that's probably worthy to read, but like, everything in that book will help you become a good product manager in 20, whatever year it is, 21, the same way that, it would have helped you working in Procter & Gamble in 1935 or whatever. And so I think the more we recognize that, I think the better we are as PMs, because that's causing us to focus on the parts of the job that really do matter and really are the hard parts, and not get distracted by the tech, the platform, the tool sets, all that kind of stuff that's ever changing and ever evolving. It's like synthesizing it down to first principles. Like, this is what this is all about. And that's the part you need to be working on, elevating, developing, and synthesizing. And, and I'll tell you, in my coaching practice, many people come in thinking the problem is around, which tooling, which technology, how do we scale it, and then we naturally always ends up being about people and process and communication and customers. And that's the part of the job that ultimately is the hardest, and ultimately is what is going to help you succeed or not.
Well, that sort of aligns with your recent newsletter article about not over obsessing on the tooling. How was that received?
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't read, I wrote a piece called "The Tools Don't Matter," which was intentionally provocative, and then I think I maybe kind of synthesized a little bit, but part of why I wrote that is, I would do, sessions like this where I would meet with people, I would speak, and then, naturally, like one of the top questions people would come ask is like, what tool do you recommend for, OKRs? What tool do you recommend for, and what I found is like that used to irritate me in a way that I couldn't really put into words. And And what I realized is like the tool ultimately doesn't matter, right? The tool is not going to solve a communication problem. Like if your team, doesn't have the right velocity, some new tool is not going to solve that for you, right? Fundamentally, it's all about people and process and what the underpinnings of the team is. And so I wrote that piece, and I expected maybe a little bit of backlash. I didn't get any. Like people loved it. People were like, "Oh yeah, this captures something that I've been wanting to say for a long time. Love it." But then it's gotten a little bit more negative, and I think it's gotten more negative because I now show up in like SEO queries for like product management tools, and so people are looking for tools and then finding this and getting annoyed. I will tell you that some of the tool companies aren't excited. I won't name names, but I noticed that somebody actually changed all my links to no follow links after I wrote that, all the links to my content. So maybe there's some people in the industry that are unhappy. But I think the broader point is, look, the parts of the job that really ultimately matter aren't the ones that are going to be solved with tools. And at Google, we used OKRs, and some people did them in Google presentations, some people did them in Google Docs, some people did them in like one of the 8 different internal tools for using OKRs. Like that didn't matter, right? And you getting a tool for OKRs isn't going to help you implement OKRs correctly if they're not working for you, any more than a tool is going to help you figure out how to improve your product road mapping if your process is broken.
I realize we have plenty of questions in Slido. I do want to make sure that the people who were organized enough to submit questions in advance also give a look in. And there's a few great questions we got there. And I think this is quite an interesting one because it speaks a little bit to some of the peculiarities of our community down here in the Southwest, which is that we have quite a few organizations which you might consider sort of quasi-governmental. So health service related, or our kind of the UK's National Weather Forecaster is based down here. The organization that maps the oceans for the Royal Navy is based down here, things like that. And government organizations tend to be or can sometimes be quite risk averse because they're spending public money. So you've spoken in the past about the importance of failure being an option. How would you coach someone in an organization like that where it's a more challenging conversation to have?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I talk about this a lot with my wife. My wife is a water and wastewater engineer. So she builds big, she's building the San Francisco seawall right now. I mean, decade-long projects that cost billions of dollars. And, there's no, hey, let's, move fast and break things when you're operating at that scale. And what I find is I think a lot of times the definition of what failure means differs, right? So, if I talk to someone who's, working in a software company and we say, what does failure mean to you? They may be like, we spend a couple of weeks and we ship something and it doesn't work. And then we have to like delete all that code and then try something else, right? And then you talk to somebody who works, in the government or, as a full-scale engineer, you say, what does failure mean? And they're like a bridge falling and like thousands of people dying. And so maybe a little bit of it is to sort of unwind your sense of failure there. Like, I'm not promoting that sort of failure. Like, that's ridiculous, right? And but failure might mean iterating in a way that allows you to try something that doesn't work. Failure doesn't mean, spending decades building something and then people die. Like, that is not what it is all about. It is about experimentation, trying new things, trying something knowing it might not work, in which case you try it in a different, more kind of tiptoey way, or you try it in a way where you get a sense for whether it's going to work or not before you're done building it. And so I think sometimes a little bit of the mindset can help. But there's plenty of room for experimentation and, trying new things that may not succeed in any environment, whether you're working in sort of a regulatory world or you're working in, building bridges or, skyscrapers. But where that where that experimentation is happening is much, much earlier in the process, right? It's not when you've got people on scaffoldings, like welding, like that's not the point to try to experiment. But there may be lots of points earlier on. And so, I think a little bit of it is just sort of what does failure mean? Does it mean the death of someone, or the death of the company? No, it shouldn't. But does it mean trying something that might not work and trying to get a little bit of evidence as early as possible that it will or will not work before you double down and invest in it? Yeah, that seems to be transferable, wherever you are. And I think this is where, the more you can connect with users and customers helps you with this mindset, right? Because if you're, say you're working for, a healthcare company, like the more you're connected with patients and talking to them regularly is the more you're starting to get a sense for what you can try, how you can iterate, like what you might discover from those conversations lets you try something new. And so I think in many cases, a lot of this sort of mindset shift is solved by just getting closer to talking to users and customers more frequently, because that now gives you the footprint to try and experiment in a way that is pretty low pressure and much, much lower risk.
So kind of linked to that, any tips or thoughts on as to how you help encourage, particularly at the senior level, more of a product culture to emerge? If there's more of an alignment on what risk really looks like, but more holistically, just in general product development, any thoughts as to how you can help encourage product thinking?
Yeah, I may be a little cynical on this, and I'm trying not to be, but I think ultimately you can transform an organization. Like I think it's you ultimately can transform to a much more product first, empowered organization, but it's very hard to do that at the ground level, right? It's one thing if you're the CEO and you're the board of directors and you say we need to become more empowered, help us transform, help us change. It's another thing when you're an individual contributor just trying to get stuff out the door to change an organization from the bottom. It's very, very difficult to do. And so, what I recommend to people is, it's worth a try, but just there's not much you can do to just really fundamentally transform the culture of your organization where you're not in a position of authority. You can try to be persuasive. You can, I've seen this work well. You can create an oxygen bubble for yourself and your team where you get a little bit more flexibility with your customers in your product area, even if the top-down mentality is different. But it's hard, right? It's hard to just say, I'm going to change this company to have a completely different perspective on what the role of product is and how technology fits into their business. Like, unless you are the CEO saying that, or a group of senior executives or the board of directors, it's hard. And so I think sometimes it's worth just recognizing what your breaking point is. And for a lot of people that I've talked to, just like, hey, how far do you think you want to get? How will you measure whether you're having progress or not? And then when will you know that it's not going to happen for you? Because it's a great recipe for burning out. It's trying to change the culture of an organization when you're just one of the troops, right? It's just very, very hard to do.
Another question we had in from Chris Miles, who submitted it via the form, was, in your experience, what is the best way to develop a healthy tension between product and tech without it becoming counterproductive? For instance, debating ideas to the betterment of the final solution, but not making tech feel like product or just telling them what to do. That's
a great question. And this is one that I feel like I intuit a lot because I've been on both sides, right? It's like I've been an engineer and then I was a product manager. And I remember what used to piss me off about product managers. I'm an engineer and I now know what pisses me off about engineers. I think that I like the term healthy tension because there should be a healthy tension, right? I mean, you have different perspectives that are coming together in a way that something better emerges, right? And so the best teams, the best things are created when a bunch of people who have different points of view come together and create something that is better than all of the individual parts would have been combined. I think the important part, though, is those different perspectives have to not be different philosophies or different cultures. And if you have a team where you have a group of engineers and a PM and there's some healthy tension, but they feel accountable to the same outcome, but there's just different points of view on how to get there, that's healthy. That can lead to a lot of innovation. Maybe the analogy I'd come up with is, maybe here in the United States, if we're going to get in the car and we're going to drive to New York from San Francisco, we could debate which route we want to take. Like, we can probably have all great argument around like whether we should go north, whether it's going to be too hot to the south. That's a good argument to have. But if half the people in the car are trying to drive to Miami and the other half of the people in the car are trying to drive to New York, that's not healthy tension. That's just fundamental dysfunction. And so I think, if the team feels like they are together accountable to the same outcome, but just have different points of view on how to get there, that can be healthy. But if you have just a completely different culture, a different mentality in engineering around what product should be built, what problems we're solving, the role of product management than you do on PM, that's unhealthy. So again, I think it kind of gets to the sense of culture, and part of why I'm so sort of interested in exploring product culture right now is if the culture is healthy around just how product and engineering and product design come together, different perspectives are great. And, we need to sort of have good, healthy debate, and it should come from a point of positivity, and we should have empathy, and we should know when debate should end, and we should move on. But that's very different than if you have just two groups pulling in completely different directions. That's not healthy at all.
So we had a question that I think sort of links to that from Charlotte Gandel, who said, can engineers ever be too involved in discovery and solutioneering?
I would say no, unless they don't have time for anything else. Like, I think that there really isn't anything to lose with having everyone on the team spend more time in discovery and with customers, like, bar none. But if, your engineers are spending 5 days a week, on customer calls or, customer visits and not getting to build anything, that's a problem. So you have to find the balance. But the balance comes from being able to do the entirety of the job, not that somehow by spending too much time with customers, you're going to detract from product management's authority or role, or sometimes that's where some of this hesitation comes from. But no, I mean, I think, the more people on the team are spending as much time as possible with customers and users, the better.
Just one more, I thought, interesting question that came in from the form. This is from Sadaf. I'm going to broaden the scope of the question just a little bit. Apologies, Sadaf, for that. If you're listening, the question essentially is about what's your advice to product managers who are looking to progress. So how do you develop in order to be able to manage more complexity and to have the trust of the organization to do that?
Yeah, this is a great question, and a big part of what I do in coaching is just helping people figure out how to keep moving forward in a way that resonates with them, right? And because what moving forward means could be very different for someone else. And so I think part of it is to really come to an understanding of what progressing means for you. Does it mean, gaining more leadership and authority and rising the management ranks? Okay, that's one thing. Does it mean just doing what you're doing now on a bigger scale or with more important products, or, okay, that's different. And we sort of have this phrase around climbing someone else's ladder. And I think a lot of times in product management, we find people who have gotten to the midpoint of their career. And I've talked to lots of these people, I'm 12 years in, I'm 10 years in, and, I just feel like I've plateaued, or, I'm flatlined, I'm not growing. And what they oftentimes mean is they're not growing in a way that externally they think growth should be measured, right? Like, well, all my friends now are directors. I'm not a director. Why aren't you a director? Because I don't want to be a director. I just like building product. Okay, well then growth for you means something different, right? Don't climb that ladder, climb your ladder. And so I think part of it is like, what really truly resonates to you? Is it, learning all the time? Is it having bigger impact? Is it having more authority? Is it managing more people? Is it having a big platform? Like, what does progress mean for you? Now you understand what progress means for you. Now you're measuring growth in a way that's unique to your own personal sense of what you value. And growth to you may be, I don't care if I ever get promoted anymore, as long as I feel like I'm learning every week and I'm being challenged and I'm working with great people. I'm happy to do this for the rest of my career. Great. Then that progress to you means something different than it does to someone else who's measuring progress based on title and wanting to be a CEO in 3 to 5 years. And so, I think the first piece of advice really is that deep reflection around, like, what is it that you want? What brings you value? What brings you joy? What parts of the job do you love and want to do more of? What parts of the job do you maybe dislike and want to do less of? Now, how do you put forward a path that's going to help you measure whether you're improving on whatever that framework is that for you matters? And I think this really is important, because oftentimes what I find is people feel like they're not advancing, and then they become more attuned into what their career desires really are and what matters to them and what their values are. And they find out that actually they're pretty happy doing what they're doing, and just feel like they need internal permission to say, I want to keep doing this. And I think this is very sort of specific to PM as well, because there is this sort of default sense that you're a PM and you're going to do that for a while, and then you're going to become a general manager, and then you're going to become a CEO or a founder. And if somehow you're not on that trajectory, then you're failing as a PM. And I think there are plenty of product people who just love building products and love being product managers and want to be able to say, I just want to keep doing this, only more, right? I don't need to do that other thing. I don't want to do that other job. And because there is this sort of prescriptive sense that the default path is up, CEO, you can reflect and feel like you're falling short of that. And, the other part I think is that we all come from different places, right? So there's not a, logical sense that, well, we all studied product management in college and then we graduated from product and then we apprenticed as, like, no, we all came from all over the place, which means there is no single way to do it. There has to just be the way that matters to you, where you feel like you are applying your skills in a way that's giving you fulfillment and you're having fun doing it. Like, period. That's all that matters.
So the next question, if we dip back into the top voted question on Slido, is how should we interpret the scope of coaching as it relates to product management, and what outcomes can we expect?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure whether that question is being asked through the point of view of the coach or the coachee. So, but I think the answer is sort of the same. I think the important, one of the fundamental sort of beliefs of coaching is that the person who's being coached is, fundamentally creative, resourceful, and whole, right? They're not broken. You're not fixing them. You're not training them. You're not teaching. Like, they have everything they have all the capabilities of being able to achieve whatever it is they want to achieve. And so, you as the coach, you're helping them unlock that, right? You're not accountable for that. They are. And whatever it is that their agenda is theirs, right? You don't have it's not like a recipe that you as the coach are following. It's more of, they have a particular place they want to get, and you have a toolbox of a bunch of different ways to help them get there. And so I think that sort of understanding of, what should coaches be accountable for? It's like, helping their coachee get to wherever their coachee wants to get, right? And then helping them understand how to get there. And how they get there and whether they get there is really up to them. The coach is sort of helping them, challenge them, push them, help them see things from a new perspective. But ultimately, it's really guided by the coachee. And I think this is in many ways also some of the differences between, mentoring or advice, where it's, there's a sense that there's like a place you're trying to get to, and I'm going to tell you how to get there. Coaching is much more of like, what's important to you? Like, where are you being challenged right now? And sort of how do I partner with you to help you get to wherever it is you want to get?
So interestingly, the next top voted question sort of relates to that quite nicely. And I think it's worth digging into a little bit, because it's an interesting one. The question is essentially, I think this is perhaps more from the perspective of someone who's also a line manager. So someone who would perhaps coaching a report.
Yep.
And the question is coaching always the answer? How do you distinguish between when the right answer is to coach and when actually someone needs more direction or more of a direct conversation?
Yeah, and that's a great question. As a manager, no, your job is not just to coach. Like, there's more to the job, right? You're managing them to outcomes. You are providing feedback to them on their performance. You are training them. You're helping to teach them, and then there's moments where coaching comes in. So, these are all tools that are in your toolkit. I think the important thing is to recognize that you name what you're doing when you're doing it, right? So if, you come into my office and, someday when we have offices again, and you want coaching on how to think about getting better at what you're doing, and I'm telling you what you need to do as your manager, like, that's going to be a sideways conversation, right? but the other side of it is if I'm coming in to you as my manager to get you to make a decision on something that is escalated to you and you want to make a decision and you're trying to coach me and, that's not, you're not doing your job either. Right. And so I think oftentimes it's just important to sort of name what you're doing and then to provide the space for each of them as they're important. And this is why I have so many strong opinions on one-on-ones, because one-on-ones often become the dumping ground for all of this. And what we find is, when I have an opportunity to get in front of my manager, I'm going to ask them a bunch of tactical things that I'm waiting on decisions for. Like, should I do this? Can I do this? What's next? I'm struggling with this. Let's go. And it's very unlikely that we're going to make space for coaching there, because we're going to just immediately drive into tactics and priorities and, urgent fires. And so as a manager, you oftentimes have to create a separate space for that. Maybe it's just, a monthly coaching one-on-one. Maybe it's a quarterly career conversation that is thought of entirely separate. And it's much more around, how can I help you connect with what it is you're trying to accomplish? How can I help guide you there? How can I ask questions? How can I challenge you? And so, all of this comes into play as part of the job of a manager. But I think the part that oftentimes gets discarded is the coaching, because it's oftentimes not really thought of or understood. And in a sort of a, move fast execution environment, the manager's impulse is, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to train you. And we oftentimes forget about how we really grow, which is oftentimes through coaching. And so, I think as a manager, the big recommendation I have for you is to sort of, name it so that you understand what you're doing it, and you can even say like, Tor, let me put on my coaching hat right now. Like, what's going on with you? Like, what are the real challenges you're facing? And then create space for it. If you find that the normal spaces you have with folks aren't enabling coaching, then schedule something else. Like, just call it what it is.
Huge wisdom there. I think it also links to a question Kevin from Wisconsin said, which is he's obviously leading a team of PMs, and so on top of coaching and helping develop PMs, he asked, what are the key focus areas you'd recommend for me as I'm trying to build my product, which is my team?
Yeah, I love hey Wisconsin, first off. I love that exact phrase that was used there at the end, which is the team is your product when you're a product leader. And I think that sort of mindset and recognition of that is sometimes not always readily apparent, and something that, when I work with product leaders and CPOs, is oftentimes a growth path for them, is recognizing that, wait, like the thing I'm ultimately accountable for, my product really is the team that's going to build the product. How do I grow them? How do I challenge them? How do I mentor them? How do I help them get to a place where they're going to up-level themselves? They in turn are going to build a product that we're all sort of, indirectly responsible for. But the more you think of your team as the product, the more you'll be tapping into a lot of the skills that you brought into that job as being a product manager. And just in terms of thinking about the problems you're solving, how you're going to measure the outcome, how you're going to challenge people, how you're going to hire, so I think that mindset is a big important part of it. I think there's a lot of things to focus on. I think if you start from the point of view of thinking about unlocking the team and enabling the team, that sort of necessarily implies priorities. It implies, hiring and growing the team is your number one priority. Mentoring and challenging these folks to think bigger, training them, helping them, putting them into situations where you're challenging them, but you're not throwing them into the deep end. Those are all sort of aspects of the job that come into play when you're a product leader. But I think that almost in some ways that question answered itself at the end of it, which is, you have to think of the team as being the product that you're responsible for, and everything else is second to that.
So I'm conscious of time. I know, as someone who's done a bit of coaching myself, that you need a little bit of time to context switch before your next session. So maybe we'll make this the last question. And I think it's a great one to end on. It's the top voted question on the Slido right now, which is, what has been the most fulfilling moment in your career thus far?
Ooh, that's a great coaching question, by the way. I've resonated on this question before, and it always comes down, there's a few, and it always comes down to team moments, right? So when I've reflected on this question, I'm always thinking of moments where we've accomplished something as a team. And there are moments when I was at, a startup before I went to Google. There are moments when I was at Google, on the Google Docs team. And, it was always a moment where I felt like we all came together and accomplished something big. And the definition of what the big was, definitely you may look at externally and be like, oh, I don't remember that product, or I don't remember that feature. But it was a sense that we did something that none of us thought was possible when we went into it, and we did it because we worked together. And so to me, that helped me understand that part of what I love and what I'm good at is helping people and teams accomplish things they didn't think they were possible, and to sort of push themselves and challenge themselves and do something 10x or uncomfortably exciting, or all the things I've written about. And so to me, those are the moments that are like the peak moments of my career, when it's sort of like you look around and you're like, I can't believe we did this. Like, that's incredible. This is amazing. Like, we all did this together. Like, you didn't do it. We did it. And so, there's a bunch of those. Like, the more I kind of tap into my memories and sort of synthesize around those moments, it's always as a team coming together, doing something we didn't think was possible.
Thanks. Unsurprisingly, Ken, the next thing is, if I'm interested in engaging with your coaching services, how do I get in touch? What's the best way to start that conversation?
Well, thank you for that. I will say this is the first business I've ever built that can't scale and doesn't have to scale. And so I'm sort of, unfortunately at capacity, but I know tons of great coaches. So please do reach out. Bringthedonuts.com is my website. That's where you find all my content. And there's a coaching link there, which tell you more about coaching and how to contact me. But yeah, please do reach out. I think, as coaches, even if we're not the right person for you, we want to connect you with the right person. And so I've found a lot of success and just sort of a lot of satisfaction from, even when I'm not the right coach or I'm not available, being able to connect someone who is the right coach. And sort of go back to Tor's original question, kind of touched us off. There's never too soon to start coaching. Find a coach, work with a coach. It's going to really, really benefit you.
Fantastic. Well, I think that brings us to a close. So massive thanks, Ken, for giving up your time and sharing your wisdom. It is hugely appreciated. And a really great range of questions. So thanks to everyone who's contributed in that way. This has been our World Product Day event, but it's not the only event we've got planned. So we're very excited to say that the next ProductTank Exeter is going to be with Teresa Torres, who, as you can see, Ken is a big fan of. I'm a big fan of. I think we're all big fans of Teresa, and she has written extensively. In fact, has written a whole book about continuous product discovery. So this, to come back to that original, what do the Procter & Gamble brand men do? It's stay close to the customer and understand what the customer's needs are. And she's written extensively about how to do that well. And so she's going to be joining us on June the 30th. So an opportunity to speak to us about that and also do a Q&A. So we'd love to see you there. It's going to be streamed like this. So join us from wherever you are in the world, or even watch it online afterwards. It's on the Mind the Product YouTube channel. So we're looking forward to that. And thanks again to Redcat Digital for sponsoring tonight. If you are looking for product roles in the UK primarily, but maybe all over the world, check out Redcat Digital for some great product opportunities. I think that's it. Is there anything else to add? Then I think it's goodbye from me. Goodbye from us.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.